I think because she is Israeli originally, and I know my family in Israel always looked at Natalie Portman. Yes, she is on the left, and she is an artiste, but she's one of ours.
You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today here on the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com, where I'm extremely excited because I have the most important and impressive guest on my show ever. We have here coming on our show today Michael Medved, whose 3-hour daily show is now broadcast on 200 stations coast to coast and reaches close to 5 million listeners weekly. He is probably the most successful Jewish talk show host in the history of American radio, and he's the ultimate expert alive today on American movies. And so who better to have on our show? I decided to aim high when thinking about who to have talk about the Natalie Portman controversy. And of course, we are talking about Natalie Portman refusing a $2 million prize that she was going to be receiving in Israel that would have gone to charities that she supports because she decided that she didn't like what was going on in our country. Michael Medved, thank you for coming here on Inside Israel Today on the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com.
Gil, it's great to speak with you, and especially about something as important as this, because Natalie Portman is one of the most respected actresses in the entertainment business, and certainly I know many, many Israelis feel very proud of her because she's one of those people who has not run away from the fact that she is from Jerusalem and that she has a very strong past and association with the land of Israel. So it's surprising to see her in this situation.
Absolutely. We'll read a little bit of what she said. At first, her assistant just said that she was upset about things that had been going on in Israel without specifying, which led to speculation that it was about Gaza. In fact, an email exchange that was revealed last night found that it was entirely about Gaza, what the assistant was writing. And Natalie clarified and said her assistant didn't speak for her and said that actually it was about Netanyahu. She didn't want to be at a ceremony in which he was speaking. At least she said that she doesn't endorse the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and that she treasures her Israeli friends and the culture. But she said, because I care about Israel, I must stand up to violence, corruption, inequality, and abuse of power. And she hinted that the migrant worker issue is actually what kept her from coming here by saying that Israel was created as a haven for refugees from the Holocaust. This explanation probably didn't sit too well with you, did it?
No. Look, the entire thing is a balagan. I mean, to use an old-fashioned word. The thing that surprises me is that I know the people who give out the Genesis Prize are very sophisticated people, and I had heard it was a $1 million prize, but I guess the inflation kicked in. I'm sure you're correct saying it's a $2 million prize.
The donor doubled it this year.
No kidding. Now, see, even for Natalie Portman, who does very well, that's a very significant sort of prize. I think that puts it right in line with the Nobel Prize. And the idea that they would decide on giving this prize to Natalie Portman without making sure that she actually welcomed it and wanted it, that's sort of a shame. And all I can think of is, in other words, the question really is, what is in her mind? What is happening here? And this really comes back, Gil, to I don't know how much time you've spent in the United States during the Trump administration, but I have never seen anything like it. The polarization in our country is not really about Netanyahu. It's about Donald Trump. And I would imagine that Natalie Portman, who is one of those people, she has spoken out very, very foolishly. We played this on our radio show. The Woman's March, which basically is protesting everything about Trump, I think it protests his very existence. And let me say, I am not a gigantic Donald Trump fan. I mean, I have very, very grave reservations about the president. But she came and spoke at the second Women's March a year after Trump's inauguration. And she talked about we needed a revolution of desire. And it was the most bizarre speech. She seemed to be saying that Trump's presidency was destroying the sex life of everybody on planet Earth.
Oh, my God.
That would be the world in which female desire and sexuality could have its greatest expression and fulfillment. That world we want to build is the opposite of puritanical. Time to think about every person's desires, needs, wants, and pleasure.
Which
wow.
I think, considering the continued high birth rate in Israel, particularly among religiously committed people, that may be a bit presumptuous. And I don't know about Natalie Portman and her personal life, but if you can look up that speech, it's nuts. It's very strange. And for someone who clearly is a very intelligent, serious film artist, who has been getting into directing, who has a lot of talent, obviously has an Ivy League education, it's very strange that she has placed herself in this position and ended up at a very sensitive moment, basically insulting the land that she says she loves.
And you've been critical of her values before. Years ago, you caused a controversy by highlighting that she had gotten pregnant out of wedlock.
Correct. This was one of those things where it was not, I wasn't criticizing her for that, because that's not my place. The place that I had was when she won her Oscar for Black Swan.
A movie you didn't like.
Which I did not like. I didn't, and it wasn't her fault. It was Darren Aronofsky, who is an extremely troubled individual and has made some particularly weird movies. He made Mother last year, which is one of the worst films I've seen recently. A film with Michelle Pfeiffer and Jennifer Lawrence and Ed Harris, and not a film with a lot to recommend it. But my previous experience with Natalie Portman, I actually corresponded with her about this, because what happened was I had Governor Mike Huckabee on, and he was in the midst of one of his many campaigns for president. I was speaking with Governor Huckabee about the problem of the stigma falling away in America about people having children outside of marriage. And I said, as an example of that, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences made a very big deal of emphasizing the fact that Natalie Portman, the Oscar winner, was very pregnant when she received her Oscar, and they made it very clear that she did not have a husband. They were very proud of it. This was so, and it wasn't Natalie that I was criticizing. It was the Academy for trying to make her into a role model. When in our country, as I think you know, there are a whole range of social problems that are very directly related to out-of-wedlock birth.
And that was important for you to highlight and
well,
make people
again,
think, I
and
hope.
not as a way of putting down either Natalie Portman or her husband. I don't know if they ever got married, frankly, but it may be her consort, the father of her children, Benjamin Millepied, and good luck to them. I mean, I don't wish her ill, and nothing that I said or that Governor Huckabee said in this exchange was in any way denigrating of Natalie Portman. It was questioning the motion picture industry, which once upon a time, I mean, for people who know movie history, Ingrid Bergman, great star of Casablanca, among other things, and For Whom the Bell Tolls, and great Swedish-American star. Ingrid Bergman had her career ruined because she got pregnant outside of marriage, and that was the 1950s. With Roberto Rossellini. The product of that union, Isabella Rossellini, became a star in her own right in Blue Velvet and other movies. But in any event, the whole point is that, frankly, I don't think anyone should make a big deal of what stars do in their personal life, because they don't have a particularly admirable personal life in most cases. The idea that there would be pride at this transgressive situation at a time when, not to put too fine a point on it, but to go back to another story that is told, is that apparently in an exchange with a Zionist, Leon Trotsky, whose real name was Lev Davidovich Bronstein, was talking about. The Zionist was asking him about why he was doing what he was doing. He says, "I'm busy making a revolution in Russia." And he says, yes, the Trotskys make the revolution, but it's the Bronsteins who pay the price. In other words, there were so many Jewish victims, including people in my own family, who were victims of that revolution. And this is not to compare any silly Hollywood project or Hollywood scandal to the unimaginable impact of the Russian Revolution. But the idea is that someone who has a child out of wedlock, who's wealthy and talented and has every asset, okay, fine. But most people who have a baby without a committed marriage are not in that situation, which is why the poverty ends up being intergenerational and often the dysfunction does.
Well, going back to Israel, the real question is, why does Natalie Portman matter so much? Our newspaper at the Jerusalem Post has certainly made a big deal, putting it on the front page day after day, highlighting it on the website day after day. And while other people have been asking, who is she really? Why do we care so much about what a Hollywood actress says about Israel today?
Well, I think because she is Israeli originally, and because she was one of those, I think people in Israel, and I know my family in Israel, always looked at Natalie Portman. Yes, she is on the left, and she is an artiste, and she's had a complicated series of ideological pronouncements, but she's one of ours. She's a homegirl. And what this is saying is, no, I don't want one of the most prestigious and lavish awards that Israel can bestow. I don't want to be honored by the prime minister. And that's what's so outrageous, is that, look, there are lots of Israelis, there are lots of Americans who disagree with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Actually, I think he has more popular support in America certainly than any Israeli prime minister in recent memory. He does have people here who like him very much, but not so much in Hollywood. And for her to say that because of her discomfort with the prime minister, that she is not even going to come to Israel to receive this prize, I understand that they have now canceled. They're looking for someone else to receive the Genesis Prize. Is that right?
There are different reports about that. It's very possible that she'll receive the prize anyway, even without coming. And the Genesis Prize has been given in the past to recipients who did not come to Israel.
But would they go ahead and give the prize with her making dafka the point that I'm not coming?
I would presume that they would not, but they have not announced a final decision. They've been rather cagey about this after being humiliated.
Wow. It seems so strange, and it's such a shame. But for people to get a better perspective, Gil, you should take a listen to that most recent Natalie Portman speech in January.
We'll play that tape. We'll play that tape right here.
Good. I think people will get a flavor. She's a very good speaker. She has a wonderful voice. She did a great job in her performance as Jacqueline Kennedy in the movie Jackie that she almost won a second Oscar for. But it is strange that we make such a fetish of our actors and actresses, don't we? And
Yes, we do.
basically what we're doing is we're giving people incredible accolades for pretending to be somebody that they're not. Because that's what you do as an actor. You assume a role.
She's clearly not the expert on Israel if she says that Israel was created as a haven for refugees from the Holocaust, when we're very proud that the land of Israel was settled way before, and had more people come, perhaps there wouldn't have been a Holocaust. We're here because we've been here for the 3,000 years,
Right.
3,300 out of the last 3,500 years. And now that message, as if we're here only because of the Holocaust, as if the land's not ours, has done a lot of damage to Israel.
No, there is no question about it, and this is something I talk about on my radio show very regularly, is that it is a canard that Israel was sort of a consolation prize that was handed to the Jewish people as compensation for the horrors of the Shoah. Of course that's ridiculous, because before Hitler even came to power, there was a thriving yishuv. There was already the revival of the Hebrew language. And before World War II began, there were more than 500,000 Jewish people living in what later became Israel. And the other aspect is that even after the war, Israel wasn't flooded with immigrants from Nazi Germany or from Europe. It was flooded with immigrants from the Arab world, which again is also very important for people to understand, is the numbers greatly overwhelmed. They now with the most recent statistics, the number is 900,000 people who came from Morocco and from Iran and Iraq and from Libya and Egypt and all over the Islamic world, and found, thank God, new homes in Israel and built the state between and by the way, this is another thing, because did a university presentation about sort of myths about the, quote, creation of Israel. I think the whole idea of creation of Israel is a bad phrase, because Israel existed, and it was already recognized by the world community. It was recognized by the League of Nations, by the British Commonwealth, going back to the Balfour Declaration. And the idea that there was all of a sudden a UN vote and then they created something out of nothing is terribly denigrating to the 100 years of effort that had preceded that.
Absolutely. Now, speaking about Israel now, and actually off the subject of Natalie Portman, you can take your film critic hat off and now be solely the talk radio host and the expert on America. We have an exciting event coming up here next month where we're going to have apparently 40 senators and a delegation of 250 leading Americans headed by the Treasury Secretary, Stephen Mnuchin, perhaps Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his daughter, Ivanka Trump, all coming for the festive opening of the American Embassy in Jerusalem. What do you think is the significance of this event, Michael Medved?
Well, I think that it's terribly significant for the Trump administration, and it will be remembered as a significant development for Israel. And I think, by the way, and it's something that I've insisted on in my radio show, and I believe this with all my heart, it greatly, greatly increases the chances of renewed negotiations with the Palestinians and the chances of some kind of resolution. Because
why?
Because it sends a very clear message. The entire question always that has been in the way of a negotiated settlement has been a Palestinian unwillingness to accept the reality of Israel's existence. And part of the reality of Israel's existence is Jerusalem as the eternal, undivided capital of the Jewish people. It has always been the capital of the Jewish people. It has been ever since. And by the way, and as you very well know, Jerusalem has had a Jewish plurality. It's had more Jews in it than Muslims or Christians since 1840, according to Ottoman censuses. And the idea that Jerusalem is ever going to be anything other than a Jewish city or the capital of Israel has been this sort of chimera that I think has remained a fantasy for people who have never wanted to accept Israel, who now, all of a sudden, with a great deal of America's political class and the Trump administration and the overwhelming support of the American people, left, right, and center, for recognizing the reality of Jerusalem's existence, I think that should be a little dose. There was a Jewish psychologist in the 1970s named William Glasser, who wrote a book called Reality Therapy. And all of a sudden the idea that yes, this is reality therapy that the Arab world very much needs. I think they've gotten the message in Saudi Arabia, and that's the other aspect of things, which I think has been remarkable here. If someone had said that this would happen, that America would finally keep the promise and move the embassy to Jerusalem, and there wouldn't be explosions all over the Arab world, no one would have believed it. And yet,
absolutely, there have been studies the violence actually went down during that period of time. It was certainly a lot less violence than there was a few months before, when Israel put metal detectors in the entrance to the mosque and the Temple Mount that are the same metal detectors we have for Jews in the entrance to the Western Wall.
No, I remember when they built the tunnels under the Har Habayit. When
1996.
Yeah, and there were riots. There were people who died over nothing because they thought that there was an attempt to undermine Al-Aqsa. I remember there were people killed around the world, about 500 of them, because of rumors that in an American prison camp in Afghanistan, some American GI had disrespected a copy of the Holy Quran and had put it near a toilet. Do you remember this? And they had riots around the world. And actually, I do think that this is a very, very good sign, as is the sign with Prince Mohammed bin Salman, peace be upon him, recognizing that Israel has a right to exist and Jewish people have a right to live there. This is a big deal. And again, I think that's made possible by President Trump's bold decision here.
Absolutely. So I guess my last question would be your message in Israel's 70th birthday of hope for the future, for the state of Israel continuing to be the impressive country that it is.
The message would be that the same way that it wasn't a UN resolution that built Israel, what built Israel was people who believed that if you will it, it is no fairy tale. Im tertzu lo agada, that this can be a reality if you seize it. And there were people who weren't waiting for Lord Balfour. There were people who weren't waiting for the League of Nations, who weren't waiting for the United Nations, who weren't waiting for the Foreign Office in Westminster in Great Britain, but people who uprooted their lives, risked their lives, worked with incessant dedication. You know, Gil, I just read something, and I'm utterly fascinated by the early history of the Zionist movement. But I had never heard this before, and it just so much amazes me. I know that you know, because you know your history. Menachem Mendel Yusishkin, right?
Yes.
Okay. He was invited to speak at the Versailles Conference at the end of World War I. Do you know about this?
Please tell us.
It's an amazing story. And Yusishkin, who was a fairly remarkable guy who, like a lot of the early Zionist pioneers, had a fairly generous opinion of himself. These were not shrinking violets, these people. David Ben-Gurion was not a shrinking violet, neither was Ussishkin. So he spoke to this august gathering at the Versailles Conference, all the leaders of the world. He spoke in Hebrew. And
good for him.
There were people apparently in tears who were moved, who were unforgettable, who didn't realize that through a miracle, through the grace of God, Hebrew had become a spoken language again. And it was in the process of revival. This is in 1919. And
that's a beautiful story.
He didn't need the permission of the League of Nations. He did it.
And that's Israel. That's wonderful. Michael, thank you so much for that story. And thank you so much for coming here on this show and for telling our listeners both about Natalie Portman and about what I wish Natalie Portman knew about Israel.
And again, look, people get very confused in the world of Hollywood because it is a world of make-believe. But it's a world of dreams, and Israel is a world of reality based on dreams.
Indeed. Michael Medved, the most successful Jewish talk show host in the history of mankind. Thank you for coming here on Inside Israel today on the Land of Israel Network, on thelandofisrael.com.
Gil, thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for being with us. Have a wonderful day from here in Jerusalem.
I'm always quite pleased when I hear that terrorists meet their end, because, of course, it's yet another terrorist who is unable to kill innocent people.
Eve Harrow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. This week, I had an exclusive interview with retired British Colonel Richard Kemp. Vast experience here in the Middle East, tremendous appreciation for Israel and specifically for the Israeli armed forces.
It's the first time in history, really, that they have actually wanted their own people to be killed by Israel.
Wonderful interview. Don't miss it. That's only on Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network.